100 Back Children's Authors for your sons and daughters, your nieces and nephews too. Join our reading crew.
Hold on a minute, Isis. What about grandmothers and grandfathers?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Isaac is Invisible. Written by Rachel Beckles. This is Isaac Elijah Benjamin Brown. He's 4.5 years old. Although he is a bright little spark, his manners are not so bold. Isaac is rude to everyone, embarrassing his mum and dad. Their son not using his best manners made his parents quite sad. "What a cute little face," people would say when Isaac stood there still. But as soon as he opened that mouth of his, he would shout, scream, and shrill. "That's it. I've had it. Go to bed," said Isaac's mum one night. His father said, "I know, I've got it. Ignore him until he's polite." Next morning, Isaac ran downstairs. "I want boiled egg and toast." He banged his fists on the kitchen table, wanting what he loved most. "Did you hear anything polite?" his mum asked. "Afraid not," his father replied. Isaac stared at both his parents with his mouth open wide. "I must be invisible," he said out loud. His dad winked at his mum. Their son was learning to be polite while they had a little fun. Isaac pulled silly faces. His parents said not a word. By now, Isaac truly believed he could not be seen or heard. "Let's go and play tennis," his dad said, handing Mum a bat. "Give me a bat," demanded Isaac. Dad didn't seem to hear that. "Did you hear anything polite?" his mother asked. "Afraid not," his father replied. Isaac stared at both his parents with his mouth open wide. "I must be invisible," he said out loud. His dad winked at his mum. Their son was learning to be polite while they had a little fun. Isaac watched his mum and dad. He thought he wouldn't care. He didn't want to be polite and he didn't want to share. "I love tennis," his mum laughed. "Me too," chuckled his dad, while Isaac tried desperately. Playing alone made him mad. "Oh, I'm tired and thirsty," his dad sighed. "Would you like a drink?" "Oh, yes, please," replied his mum, and gave his dad a wink. "I want a drink now," shouted Isaac, jumping up and down. He was feeling thirsty too, and threw his bat to the ground. "Did you hear anything polite?" his mum asked. "Afraid not," his father replied. Isaac stared at both his parents with his mouth open wide. "I must be invisible," he said out loud. His dad winked at his mum. Their son was learning to be polite while they had a little fun. "Time for another game," said Mum. "Would you like to play Snap?" "Great idea," replied his dad, giving a joyful clap. "I want to play Snap," shouted Isaac, hoping that this time they heard. But he didn't use his manners, so they ignored his every word. Did you hear anything polite? His mother asked. Afraid not, his father replied. Isaac stared at both his parents with his mouth open wide. I must be invisible, he said out loud. His dad winked at his mum. Their son was learning to be polite while they had a little fun. His parents played so happily, sharing out the cards. Isaac found that a game for two, alone, was very hard. It's time for dinner now, said Dad. Mum went to lay the table. Isaac was glad he wasn't asked, although he knew he was able. Isaac was so horrified to see the table was set for two. Perfect, smiled his mum to Dad. One for me and one for you. I want dinner! Isaac screamed as loud as his little lungs could. He knew that this time he had to be heard, or at least he hoped he would. Did you hear anything polite? His mother asked. Afraid not, his father replied. Isaac stared at both his parents, but this time Isaac sighed. I'm tired of being invisible, he sniffed. He missed his mum and dad. He thought about his behaviour that day and realised he'd been quite bad. He thought he'd try one last time in the nicest possible way. He remembered all the polite things his parents asked him to say. Dad, please may I have some dinner? Isaac said to his dad. He didn't want to be invisible and was feeling very sad. Oh my goodness, there you are! Where have you been all day? Isaac, so shocked that they heard, he didn't know what to say. What lovely manners you used, my son. Of course you may have some dinner. Now Isaac knew they could see him again. He really felt like a winner. He sat at the table with a grin spread across his cheeks. He remembered to use his manners for weeks and weeks and weeks. Isaac's parents were so happy their son was being polite. He was no longer a rude little boy. He was now a joyful delight. But if Isaac ever did slip up and forget to say please, he'd quickly remember that a boy with no manners is a boy that nobody sees. Okay.
I really like that story, Tantan, and everyone should use their pleases and thank yous, and no one should be rude, shout or scream. We should always use our manners.
Very good. Thank you, Isis. Thank you for listening, and see you next time for another story written by a Black author. Bye-bye.